Okay, implementing the accommodations and the behavior intervention plans in the classroom. Let's talk about that a little bit. How do we do this? What does it look like? So once you get your sheets, or get your email with the sheets, what I would suggest, or what our special education department suggests, is that you print these sheets out, make a binder if you can. I know this is a little time consuming, but it does help in order for you to be able to look at these accommodations and these behavior plans quickly when you are in the classroom. As soon as you do get them, which sometimes, depending on scheduling issues and things like that, you might not get them till the first or second day of school, possibly the end of the first week. And I know that seems like a lot to you guys, because it's really good. And I know, just coming from the classroom, that it was good to get that before class started and before school started, in order for you to kind of read them and understand them. Well, we can't really do that. We can't really release the information due to FERPA, because it's legal, kind of legal stuff. If we give you information from one student and that student doesn't end up being in your classroom, then we're in violation of FERPA. So we have to make sure that we're staying within legal guidelines whenever we are giving this information out to teachers. And I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but on our end of things, it's a huge deal. So the DIAGs will send out that information to you via email, and get that information for you. Once again, I know as a former classroom teacher that you might not even know your students' names yet, and it takes a while to learn your students' names, and I understand that. So it's just going to kind of be probably fly by the seat of your pants at the beginning, but you can make adjustments from there. Once you get those accommodations and you look at them and you see what that student needs, make sure that you are preparing material ahead of time. The notes, I know, a lot of times you might not have your notes completely filled out. You might go ahead and fill out notes in order to give those to students. Seating charts work really well if you do have an accommodation of preferential seating. And a lot of this comes by you doing it naturally as a good teacher. The shortening of tests that might happen, oral responses from students, all that kind of stuff can be implemented in your discussion just by either asking that student out loud in a classroom discussion if they're comfortable with that. If not, that's going up to their desk after the discussion and asking them for an oral response afterwards. You really don't want to call them out if they're not comfortable with being called out in front of everybody, or interacting in a classroom discussion. You might have a share with a partner, and once you understand who they get along with in class, or they're comfortable with in class, then that's who you kind of sit them by and pair them up with all the time. Instructional wise, visual cues, that's going to kind of be stuff on the board that you have on the board, or have through your iPads, up on the Apple TV. You can easily do that with presenting the information. A lot of times, if we are doing lecture style or something like that, you might want to put somewhere, either on Edmodo or on your web page beforehand, in order for that student to be able to look at it. I know we all utilize Edmodo. Edmodo is a great place for students with accommodations, specific accommodations, to get information. And that way you're not having to fumble, during class to get it to them. You can just say, go check Edmodo. I put it on there. And I know a lot of you already do that, which is amazing. We do have an accommodation center where students can take the tests. It's only for testing. And these is mainly for students who need a quiet place, small group, who need oral, it read to them, parts of it, all of it, whatever it may be. You do have to make sure that you contact Chris Bone, who is the head of our accommodation center, and you let them know, or let her know, what students and what days those students are coming. Or you can send her a calendar so that she's prepared for your classes. And so she knows that that student needs that. If they do have read-all materials, which some students do have that accommodation, then they might need to go down there, and she's aware of that, and that's okay. If they do need to have everything read to them, once you get to the work that you have for the student to do, after the lesson, or whatever it may be. If the students refuse to go to the accommodation center, then you say, okay, and you document it. And you email their caseworker or DIAG, which would be Deanne Ingholm is A through K, and Natalie Rose is the rest of the alphabet. So make sure you're just keeping them in the loop if that student is having issues, because they can do an art amendment, they can talk with the student, they can talk with the parents, and sometimes they have a little more, I don't know, I'd say a little more leeway than, not leeway, but a little more on, being able to get things rolling a little better, and to document things that occur in your classroom. The biggest thing for any of these, for the accommodations and for the behavior intervention plans, is that you are documenting behaviors, documenting what works well for the student, what doesn't work well, what was a complete failure, what they refuse to do, anything with writing. All of that information will help the student, will help the art committee, will help the diagnosticians and anybody else who is testing that student, and also parents. That way they can kind of help at home if they need to, when they know what works best for their student, their child. A lot of times parents really don't have an idea sometimes of what works well at school with their child, and because you're with them and you see them, and they're not at school with them, and they don't know exactly their best learning style and their best way of doing things. Sometimes that comes from you. So just remember that this is not supposed to be a more time consuming, you having to create more things. It's basically just creating different ways for students to learn the best way they possibly can. And a lot of us do that in our classroom anyway. And so a lot of these you're already hitting, and you don't even realize you're hitting a lot of these accommodations, because you already do them in your classroom, and you're a rock star in your classroom. So remember that sometimes they're already there, and you can just mark, on that student's name for the day that they did great at whatever the accommodation was that you used. Documenting, once again, is intervention plans, how to implement them in your classroom. The biggest thing to know is that you need to make sure that you find out information on your students beforehand. So that might be calling parents, talking to the diagnosticians, possibly talking to some teachers that have had that student in previous years and what worked and what didn't work with them. A lot of times, looking at their behavior intervention plans when you do get them, it's going to be calm voice, using some different, avoiding arguments, or, the power struggle, anything like that. If they need extra support, some of them might have IBIS support. This is the last option. You can talk to the IBIS teacher, who is Marissa Northern, and see what she thinks about it, and maybe she can give you some strategies to use also. But a lot of it is just making sure that that student doesn't get disgruntled, and when they do, being able to handle that situation calmly, and making sure that they know, kind of who's in control. If you need to talk to the assistant principals, whichever ones the student runs in that alpha, a lot of times the assistant principal might have some information that would also help. So it's just kind of about gaining information on that student, and then looking at the behavior intervention plan, looking at the interventions, looking at what the target behavior is, and trying to make a plan within your classroom. And sometimes it's going to be a day-to-day basis. Sometimes, there might be behaviors that aren't mentioned in the behavior intervention plan. And if there are behaviors that aren't, mentioned, then document them, put them down, and let the diagnostician, let the parent, let whoever know that this behavior is happening in the classroom. You can do this through email. You can do this through calling. But contacting us in the ISO office and getting us to kind of help you with that student sometimes can really make an impact within your classroom. There's going to be good days with the student. There's going to be bad days with the student, and it's okay. It's just being able to go home, wipe the slate clean, and know that some of these behaviors, it's not the student's choice to have them, and we have to cope with these behaviors in order to learn with the student and be able to work with the student and do that in a positive way in order for them to be successful in your classroom. Well, that kind of sums up what accommodations and behavior intervention plans, reading them, understanding them, and implementing them in your classroom. If you have any questions, feel free to contact myself. Feel free to contact either one of our DIAGs. Feel free to contact anybody within the special education department at administration. And we all are willing to help. This is a team effort, and we all have to work together in order to enable our students to be successful. Thank you.